Back with us on the SportsMax Zone, skipper Aaron Finch and his Australia team are in St. Lucia ahead of Friday's start of the 5-match T20 series against the Windies. Several big names have opted not to travel, but any international Australian squad is formidable. This is the selection: Finch, Henriquez, Marsh, Turner, Agar, Christian, Carey, McDermott, Philippe, Wade, Agar again, Berendorf, Hazelwood, Meredith, Stark, Swepson, Ty, and Adam Zampa. The Aussies now are number 5 in the latest T20 rankings, while the Windies are at number 8. And Fazeer Mohammed joins us for a preview. Good afternoon, Fazeer.
Good afternoon, George. Good to be on the show once again.
Good. I didn't realize it was so long since the Aussies played the West Indies in a T20 in the Caribbean. You go back to what? 2012. And the last time they would have met in a T20, 2014. And then when you look at the overall history of T20 games between the teams, not that many since 2008, since they first played that one in a one-off one at Kensington Oval. With that said, and with the quality of the Australian selection sent to the Caribbean, what are you expecting?
Well, just to give you some context to what you mentioned about the rarity of those meetings, you have to keep in mind that there's essentially 2 divisions in international cricket, even if they are so-called top tier. And because aside from world tournaments, you would only have these T20 series tacked on to a one-day series or a test series. And West Indies are hardly afforded the privilege to play Australia anymore, or India for that matter, or England and so on. It's a big deal with England coming next year. So that sort of puts that in context. But as far as the series coming up, yes, as you mentioned, a number of key names are missing. No David Warner, no Steve Smith, no Glenn Maxwell, no Pat Cummins. So you might want to say it's a weakened Australian team, except that the Australians have a very competitive environment. You would hope that the West Indies would have learned from what happened in the series against South Africa. Issues with soaking up dot balls, too many scoreless deliveries, the challenges against spin. And Australia will have a couple of spinners. You mentioned Adam Zampa, who's very well known in that department. Mitchell Swepson is also a left-arm wrist spinner. And while there may be some names that are virtually new to us, like a Wes Agar, who's the brother of Ashton Agar, he's a seamer as well, yet to play a T20 international. You have a number of players in there who are battling to get into the World T20 squad. And this is the issue, George. Everyone wants to make an impression to get into that T20 squad for the World Tournament in the UAE in October, November. And given the fact that they have been in St. Lucia for a while, they played a warm-up match yesterday. They have another one, I think, coming up either on Thursday, in fact, tomorrow, because the series starts on Friday. I think Australia are going to be ready. There's no question of them being undercooked for this series against the West Indies.
The West Indies will find themselves in a situation where they are in the middle of a 15-game run of T20 games as they prepare for the World Championship in October. So this is the midway point, of course, Pakistan to come after the previous battle against the South Africans. So there is time to experiment, is the point I'm driving at here, Fazeer. So based on what you saw against South Africa, where the West Indies, I'm going to say they went from the sublime to the ridiculous, from chasing 161 with 30 balls remaining and 8 wickets in hand, successfully chasing down 161. That's the sublime. To losing a game in which there were 48 dot balls. Do you expect the experimentation to continue? And do you expect the performances to be as wild as they are between the points of chasing down 161 and losing a match where there were 48 dot balls as you batted?
I suspect that there will be. And yes, you're right. The West Indies team, the coach, the authorities can't complain about this opportunity, because you can't really look back to a time when the West Indies would have had 15 T20 matches leading up to a T20 World Cup, or 15 ODIs leading up to a 50-over World Cup. So this is excellent preparation. You're playing South Africa, you're playing Australia, you're playing Pakistan, you're playing formidable opponents. Yes, there will be some chopping and changing, because you see that situation at the top of the order. Evan Lewis, Lendl Simmons, you've got Andre Fletcher, you've got Chris Gayle. So there's a lot of switching around going on in that top 4. They have to determine their tactics. Again, significantly, whereas the South Africa matches were 2:30 in the afternoon, these are all, based on the timings I saw, 7:30 in the evening. So they are all night matches, which will be favorable for an Australian audience early in the morning, their time, the next day. So will that be a factor as to the conditions and the lights Remember, it's against St. Lucia, the pitch prepared by Kent Crafton. Will it have some extra juice in it that will encourage the faster bowlers, even if it is T20? But that thing you pointed out, George, that issue with the dot ball, that has nothing to do with being mercurial. That is poor. So even in that match where you talked about sublime, the West Indies, yes, won with 5 overs to spare, but in those 15 overs, they soaked up 36 dot balls. So again, it appears to be a recurring decimal. 48 was the worst overall, but then you had 42, then you had 40, then you had 42 again in the final match. So when you talk about taking advantage of your opportunities, the West Indies certainly aren't taking advantage of their opportunities as far as the 120 deliveries allotted to them. The challenge with facing spin. Australia have a couple of spinners, as I mentioned already, and seeing the struggles against Tabraiz Shamsi, and yes, he's the #1 bowler in the world, but it sends a message to everybody else, including Australia.
Definitely, Faz. And George spoke about experimenting with the squad in time for, of course, the T20 World Cup, saying that we have a bit of time because we next face Pakistan. But my question is, how long will the experiment continue? Because we had Chris Gayle, who, a lot of people had a conversation about his selection, scoring a total of 56 runs. If he doesn't fire in this particular matches, does he continue?
I suspect that he will, because I think they want to give everybody a fair opportunity from now until the final match against Pakistan. Which
27. The number of sixes that the West Indies hit, they hit about 36s more than the South Africans did. Of course, the South Africans did hit more 4s. But as a percentage of their aggregate total across the 5 games, 6s accounted up for 40% of the West Indies' runs, while 6s accounted for just 17% of South Africa's runs. And you saw batsmen in South Africa getting useful enough scores, while the West Indies, if it wasn't one big hitter, of course, getting a lot of 6s, more than likely Evan Lewis, based on how he trended over the whole series, there wasn't much else, and there wasn't much as what we call basic rotation of the strike. And I'm wondering, I didn't see enough of that adjustment being made by the boys as the series got older, and I feel silly to be wondering if I'm going to see that in these 5 games against Australia, because it ought to be there, because that's how cricket is played.
Well, again, the data that you just pointed out, it really depends on how they are looking at this data. Are they backing themselves still, no matter what, to power hit their way out of trouble, even after what we saw in the series against South Africa? And I think both senior people in the squad recognize that. The captain, Karen Pollard, he described it as a definition of insanity to be doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Coach Phil Simmons talked about the tactics and the techniques that are being used in these matches. And that is, without spelling it out, it talks about this preoccupation with hitting 6s. And again, people might get excited. 30 more 6s than South Africa. That's all boys, big hitting. Who won the series? It's like that Spain had 80% more passes than Italy. Who is going to the Euro 2020 final? So again, these things are useful if they take you to victory. But if they don't, you need to relook that strategy.
Definitely, Faz. And while we are aware that batting is the problem, we had a couple of standout bowlers. We knew spin was the king when we played against South Africa. Who do you see, standing up, stepping out with the ball for West Indies come this series?
Well, I think Obed McCoy has been the revelation, with all of the variations that he will possess, bowling back of the arm, and then some genuine quick deliveries as well. Dwayne Bravo, the veteran, with all of the comments made that some of the old fellas should get out of the side. The fact is that he continues to deliver. Yeah. So it's not so much, George and Mariah, about saying, well, get rid of these 3 or 4 and bring in these 3 or 4, even though you do have options. Shafin Rutherford, you have Rovman Powell, you have quite a few others who will be thinking that they still have opportunities in these remaining 10 matches, 5 against Australia, 5 against Pakistan. But I think more than anything else, it's about their approach to the game and whether or not to this West Indies team, because he's such a versatile player. I think it's about our players recognizing their roles, recognizing the situation that they are in, and adapting their games to suit it. That is the essence of a quality sportsman or woman.
Finally, Fazeer, as we look ahead, this is the perfect time to ask this question ahead of the start of the series. When you look back at the squads that played in that one-off T20 game between the teams, the first one in 2008, from the Australian squad, none of those players are active now at the international level. For the West Indies, Pollard remains, Dwayne Bravo remains, and we're talking T20 cricket, so Fidel Edwards is still around the West Indies squad. Chris Gayle didn't play in that 2008 game, but he is still around as well. What does that say about the trajectory of the teams producing international cricketers versatile enough to play?
Franchise players who are highly valued still in the game. So it's not as if they don't deserve their opportunities. It doesn't mean, though, that they're automatically guaranteed a spot for a World T20 tournament. No one should feel so entitled. But I understand your point about...
Especially since that time, and have been, well, franchise players, tournament winners, IPL MVP, IPL Purple Cap, the whole lot. Chris Gayle, the most dangerous man in T20 cricket from that time until, well, the very most recent few years and so forth. So it is a fact that quality obtains and carries through from 2008, even though you look at a team that is continuously being refreshed and you look at the same names in the Windies selection and you wonder about whether or not we are generating the number of players to be a force at the top level. But that's chalk and that's cheese, depending on what you want, whether you want to write or you want to eat. Fazeer, that's all the time we have. We'll be talking as the series goes along to see what these West Indies boys can. I won't insult you by asking you for a prediction because we never know what the West Indies will give us. I don't want to tie you to anything. All the best.
Well, you always challenge me with that chalk and cheese and those sort of remarks. And this time I'm actually stumped for a reply. So let's finish.
That's good.
There you go, my friend. All right.
Faz is never stumped for a reply.
No, never. Always has the right answer.
So, George, that means you're upping your game. We have to go to break, though.
For sure.